Hi everyone. Oh, that's pretty loud. Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right. Welcome. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Yvonne Leon-Kane. I'm SVP Group Media Director at Media Hub, and I'm also a proud member of the BIMA board. Woo woo! So we are very excited today to introduce our panel, which is all around gaming, present and future. This is actually our first thought leadership event for BIMA for the year, so thank you for coming. And I like this crowd. Thank you. And also thank you to our sponsors, Activision Blizzard Media. So a little bit about BIMA for those of you that don't know. BIMA is New England's largest digital media community. We have 3,000 different members, from planning and buying to publishers, that are all engaged in the New England market. You are in our Media Hub offices today. Thank you for being the first ones to christen this. We've been here around 2 to 3 years, but this is like our first big event here, so welcome. Media Hub's mission is centered around challenging everything. And with this, it's so incredibly important because everything is changing in the US, globally, each and every day at a rapid pace. So this allows us to be able to get better business outcomes for our clients. So I want to introduce our expert panelists. We have them from Activision Blizzard Media, iProspect, the Trade Desk, and Media Hub. And what we'll be speaking about today is why it's important for brands to tap into the gaming landscape and how we can get consumers to resonate in this space. So without further ado, I will introduce our moderator, Meredith Barillo. She's Senior Director, Global Head of Business Marketing at Activision Blizzard Media. She oversees global marketing responsibility for accelerating revenue growth through ROI driving marketing tactics. And before that, she was agency side. She worked as a Director of Global Marketing Sciences at PhD. So I'll pass it over to Meredith.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at BIMA's Thought Leadership Discussion on Gaming, and a special thanks to the Media Hub for being our hosts tonight. So, as mentioned, my name is Meredith Barillo, and I'm the Global Head of Business Marketing at Activision Blizzard Media. Our legendary portfolio includes iconic mobile titles such as Candy Crush, esports like Call of Duty League, and top PC and console gaming franchises such as Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and more. I'm joined today by this esteemed panel to discuss the present and future of gaming. I'd like to introduce you to Adam Casper, EVP Managing Director at iProspect, Harry Wilkins, Senior Manager of Gaming at the Trade Desk, and Rutvik Kakol, Media Supervisor here at the Media Hub Worldwide. Now let's begin. So, gaming is a huge entertainment platform with over 3 billion gamers globally. Why should marketers be paying attention to gaming as a media channel? What makes in-game advertising so unique and worth testing? Adam, I'd really love if you could open up the discussion for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you said it right there, 3 billion people globally. And I think I saw a stat that said 66% of all Americans are involved in gaming somehow. So that right there is the scale that you need. And then it's a matter of figuring out what's right for your brand and what's right for your consumer and the way to reach them through gaming. I mean, it's, I'm sure we'll get into it a lot. There's obviously many tiers to what gaming means. It's a big word, and there's many different definitions for it. And so as soon as we dive in, we see kind of different levels of involvement from people, which brings in different opportunities. And I think it's a matter of figuring out what's the way your brand's going to resonate in that space, and kind of build it from there.
Yeah. I mean, Harry, I'd like to hear too, like for your work at the Trade Desk, when you think about that in-game opportunity, tell me about the testing. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah. I think really like kind of what makes in-game unique can really kind of just be boiled down into like a lot of aspects, but I think there's kind of like 3 key parts, and all of them kind of come into like the testing process. But the content like of games, I think, is a good place to start. Like what games are you actually like playing? We've come so far from the days of like Snake on like Nokia devices, like God bless her. We always say like one way or another. To now, yeah, like we kind of live in this world where you have like Call of Duty on mobile devices. So what that's done is like that's kind of just like opened up like so much access to like video games like through content for these like 3.2 billion players, as Adam mentioned. And I actually I have a funny story of a friend who plays Call of Duty mobile, but he's not like a PC or like console gamer. But like the kind of mobile game is his way to like consume that like video game content. And so he's in my WhatsApp group with my friends that is kind of focused on Call of Duty, which I do not recommend. It's a very, very distracting thing to have. Yeah, so what this kind of like Call of Duty mobile has done is like allows what would be previously inaccessible through PC or console games like on a mobile device, and it's a beautiful 2 billion gamers.
So it's interesting. You're talking a lot about like people and the connection, and kind of we talked a little bit about the scale. So I'm interested. The next question I have is really around like gaming allows all sorts of players, right? And we're talking about big sizes here, and you have personal stories, right? These are things that people can connect to, regardless of age. These virtual communities, right? A WhatsApp group or a environment where you're logging on, you're playing with your friends, you're sharing a social experience. That's a vastly different vision than what a lot of people have in their minds when they think about who a gamer actually is, right? And when we talk about 3 billion, right, that can't be a homogenous group. That is a gigantic number of people. So are there still misconceptions about who gaming audiences really are, and how do we shift that narrative? I think Ruth, I'd really like to hear from you.
I mean, like to this day, we'll hear from people, gamers just in the basement, eating Cheetos all day. That's all they do. We call it mom's basement maybe. But at the end of the day, we're all gamers, whether or not like some form or fashion you're a gamer. You think about how many times like you play Game Rush, you're a gamer. If you've ever played Angry Birds, you're a gamer. If you've ever played Call of Duty, you're a gamer. Like literally, there's so many ways that you are a gamer that you might not know about it. And as an advertiser, I think one of the big kind of solutions, or one of the big things that we always have to look for is how are we actually listening to our audiences, that we're actually connecting with them? Are we actually making sure that our ads are through their face and they're actually paying attention and caring about it? And think about how when you browse the internet, you might see an ad like that, hey, because I'm going to store that. Right? Or you're on TV, you see an ad, you might mute it, you might switch the channels. The big thing about gaming is your attention as a gamer is 100% always what's happening on screen. Right? So no matter what, your attention is dedicated to what's happening. Whether or not you're moving the character around or swiping something, your attention's there. So how do you integrate your brand, however you want to market that, within the actual conception? How do you play the mechanics of it so that they're forced to not just look at it, but like interact with it?
I'm curious, how pervasive do you think that misconception is about gamers among advertisers?
I mean, gaming has a huge perception. There's no question about it. There's not a single media channel, if you want to call it that, out there that is as big in scale that has relatively little adoption from an advertising standpoint. So there's a few barriers, I think, that that gaming has. One is just simply the name of it. Is people think, of that image of, and I feel like I've been hearing this description of a gamer for like the past 10 years. And it's always followed up by, it's not a kid in the basement of his mom's house playing eating Cheetos. But it's kind of the same story over and over, and it's what people immediately think about when they think about gaming. I think that the solution has to be around education and about showing kind of the let's call it marketing community, that there's many avenues into it, and there's many ways to kind of get at that mass that you can reach through gaming. But there needs to be, I think a big part of it, for at least for clients, is branding, and feeling like they're risking their brand's safety, I guess.
And it's going to be scary, right?
Right. By going into gaming because you don't know what you're going to, I think online video suffered from that, right? When YouTube came out, people were very scared about their ad running against, somebody ranting about politics or a bad product review. And this is kind of the same thing. People are hesitant to get into it because they don't know where it's going to end up, and they feel like the controls aren't there. So there needs to be a level of just, whether you're adding in some type of a brand safety monitoring service or a partner there to make sure that you can get into gaming and test it in a way where you're not risking your brand's perception.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different gamers, a lot of different ways that different people are engaging, right? All different things. So there's a lot to educate on, right? There's
Absolutely.
a lot to educate on.
Could I just add, I think that there's an interesting connection between virtual communities and kind of where these misconceptions of a gamer came from. They're actually if some people maybe don't know that the history of them are closely linked in terms of these ideas of guilds or alliances or clans. They started in games like World of Warcraft and really kind of became a key part of a game's success. And so there's just some interesting history there where they kind of overlapped. And I don't think a lot of people realise that the games that you play today, there might be this kind of negative connotation of the gamer, but there was a real kind of how many times you say misconception?
That means you're talking too long.
I think I'll probably.
There's an inherently social nature, right, in the way people want to experience entertainment together, right? In the same way that you see something you love, you get excited about something, you want to share it, right? So there's very much an organic nature in the way that social sharing happens in and outside of the gaming environment.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that we've been talking about this, misconception again, that Marco's playing on. That also, when we talk about media consumption, there's been a lot of shifts in the way that it's actually been consumed. Gaming has been consumed, right? What was born out of a very traditional evening activity, right, has now become hyper accessible, right, and consumed at all different times, all different points in the day, accelerated by the accelerated by the pandemic, but also just continuing on this trajectory of growth that was always going to happen with gaming. So if we think about consumption changing and growing, it can be challenging for marketers as they start to think about, well, where does gaming fit in my media mix, right? How is attention moving through different vehicles, whether it's social or connected TV? How does gaming add to or steal from time spent with other entertainment, right? So I'm curious about how this group feels and thinks about the addition of gaming as a part of as a channel, as part of channel planning in the mix. So Group Vic, I'm curious, how you think about the diversity of entertainment and where gaming can kind of fit into a media plan or a media strategy.
I think we really just have to think about it as it's just another market and just another way of consuming. If you think about how social media works, it's an online community of people, and you got to really perceive gaming the same way. I think and just understanding that people are buying into things and looking at things and talking to people, trying to connect with people the same way that you would approach something like social media. So I think everyone tosses, especially right now, the word metaverse nonstop. I don't think people understand that it's not just a Facebook thing. It's also just a way of understanding that gaming can fit into this model of having virtual connections with people, and then as a brand or as a marketer, you can connect into this space and interact with people the same way that you would on Facebook or Twitter or something.
And I think, to your point, the metaverse can be more than that, right? But the metaverse also feels very future, right? It feels very forward.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's opportunity outside of kind of that next gen look at the marketing mix and channels in that way?
People think of Ready Player One, essentially. They think of the VR world, you go in, you interact with people with goggles. It's not entirely all what it is, I think, right now. And that's not entirely, I think, we think about how can you connect in a way that is not that with what we have right now. So examples like Fortnite right now, right? You might not think of that as a metaverse, but at the end of the day, it's not just what it used to be, which is fly in, you fight people on an island. It's not just that anymore. Now you can go in and have hangout sessions, have concerts that are in there. There are literally we're doing an activation right now with World Crew built entire real ship over a new ship that we're launching. So you can literally design things in many ways and have those communications, have those connections with people. It's not just you put on a dollar, go on.
Adam, what do you think?
I mean, look, I mean, gaming is social by nature. I think that a lot of gaming, though, doesn't happen in a social. I think a lot of it happens by, just somebody on their phone, and they're playing Wordle. There's no ads, but, or they're playing Candy Crush, and there's plenty of ads. And there is a social aspect of it that you can share and you can be competitive with friends and that type of thing. But a big part of it, I think, I kind of look at it. There's kind of two categories, I think, in gaming. There's your kind of your console gaming where there is a huge opportunity for being social and for creating clans and for talking to your friends about what you're doing and what your plans are. And then there's and granted, there's some gray areas in between. And then there's your handheld gaming where you're probably just maybe either playing on your own or playing. Sometimes it's a one-on-one thing with somebody else. It doesn't quite offer that same type of social experience. But it all gets grouped into this big thing called gaming, right? And I think as an industry, there needs to be more separation around that in order to be able to really to tap into what the potential is.
So do you think then, as amateur students are starting to explore the world of gaming, which is very diverse and has a lot of different levels of integration or levels of depth, that there's an opportunity for any kind of marketer to kind of think about gaming in the mix? Or do you think that it's really important that the advertiser really is spending time educating themselves on gaming?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the basic level of advertising and gaming, it's as simple as somebody checking a box in the DSP and saying that I'm okay with this content, and then it's running on someone's phone and when they're in the middle of the game. And so from that perspective, I don't know that the advertiser needs to buy into the concept of gaming per se, but I think as you start to expand what you're doing and start to really try and get the most out of the channel, a lot of it's about customizing your approach and customizing your content and really thinking about the consumer and how they're going to be receiving the advertising during the game. And that's, I think, a much bigger opportunity than just kind of an inventory source.
So this is leading me to my next question, which is, with so many channels, right, that are dividing people's attention every day, so many different screens, how can a brand work to ensure that they're reaching the correct audience, that their ads are actually breaking through what you see? Mary, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'd say that most of the magic in those questions is probably getting answered at the media planning or the agency level with the creatives. So my response is probably slightly jaded here because I am on the tech side, but I do think there are kind of questions you can answer, or at least measurement strategies that you can set up to help answer those questions. So yeah, am I reading the right audience, or am I engaging them long enough? One of the questions could also one of the ways that you could answer that would be if I include gaming in my media plan, am I adding more conversions into this campaign, or is my time to conversion increasing? You can kind of just play around with those levers, and as much as we don't want gaming just to be kind of a check on the box, I think having a measurement strategy that's including gaming and helping just the advertisers understand the value there through just a simple metrics is important.
I mean, you're bringing up an inherently digital, right? And so when we think about conversion, we think about all of the tactics and tools that we know work to drive performance, right? There's a clear way to think about gaming as a digital vehicle for that. But as we talk about attention, though, right, and we start to think about what is the opportunity for brand advertisers, for people who are upper funnel, do you see context in gaming as an opportunity for breakthrough outside of just highly creative development opportunities that you're doing in a very specific game? But is it white space for brand advertisers today? Is it a place in which the attentive audience is there in a scaled way?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, just from a planning perspective, when we start thinking about if we want to tap into gaming, it's not necessarily just, let me just tie myself to a certain game, at least if it's an audience. Let me first peel back some layers and understand what it is my audience is actually really interested in first, and then see if there's a connection. It doesn't necessarily have to be with the game, but like, I guess I'll give you an example. We did an activation on track film on the Civil Mobile with Volt. For our Civil Mobile audience, our audience was a younger skewing audience, maybe 25. A lot of their interests were in like, pop culture, sneaker culture, gaming was kind of one, hip hop. So we partnered with Revolt, that was a good fit. It was one of our best performing campaigns, and the reason being is we were able to find specific activation with that called Game Dave. So I don't know if anyone's a basketball fan, but Josh Hart, he has his game show on it, so he brings out different influencers and whether it's athletes, musicians, whatever. But during that activation, we found out that like, okay, our audience highly resonates with gaming, but all of these take marks are equal for a specific audience as well. So you don't necessarily have to completely like dive into gaming necessarily, but you can find connections, you can find ways to get to it still, and then see if that works for your audience first, and then you can get a little corrections like, okay, this is really valuable.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Just speak a little louder. I can hear you, but I think maybe not in the back. Thank you.
I would just add to that, like, it's got, gaming's got scale, and it's got attention, and a lot of things with scale, medias with scale, don't have that attention necessarily. Social does, for sure, and that's, everything's moved towards attention, right? What gaming hasn't proven yet is that that it's a place that brands can build their, say, reputation. And I think that's so, like, as of today, as a whole, that's what's missing. And you've got two key components. So like, the building blocks are there. It's just a matter of, I think, perception from an advertiser perspective.
Makes sense. So I think what is an interesting way to think about this, right, and the proving point is also like, we have to not only prove it to the advertiser, but the players can also help us do that proving for us, right? Because players are very vocal, they're very passionate, people who love entertainment. On our side, right, at Activision Blizzard Media, we're seeing that through a lot of our player research that when advertising is done well, it can become very additive to the player experience. There's something highly valued there. And that, you know, our players, they like value exchange, right? Like many people today, they're looking for something to feel valuable to them for their time because they know that their attention is valuable. So how important is creativity and that context and that environment when we're thinking about the value exchange within gaming, right? Because there are going to be instances where you're adding something new and exciting. There are going to be other instances where they're coming to a game over and over and over again. They're coming back years at a time because they like what they got there, right? And you want to make sure that the advertiser is coming in the right way. So I'm curious, you know, if you're thinking about how you would be talking to marketers today and as marketers yourself, like how do you think about context? How do you think about that value exchange? Harry?
I think kind of talking about it through the lens of mobile app, because that's kind of where like most of the brand opportunities live today, or at least like in my world it does. The whole kind of like value exchange of like content and like ad experiences has been like integrated so well that it's really kind of created this unique opportunity where there is a lot of opportunities for brands to really kind of get creative with the formats. Some of those formats being like rewarded video, you know, like the users are like literally consenting into like watch an ad for content via like an extra level or like an extra like, etc. And there's this also this new format of like intrinsic ads, which like I don't know if like
You want to explain?
So intrinsic ads actually started like years ago, but like it wasn't really fully adopted until recently. Those are games where like if you're in like a city and there's a billboard, advertisers can essentially like insert ads into those spaces. Another example would be like a football stadium, you know, there's ad space there. You can now like populate those ad spaces with actual, so you can do that programmatically or it's like hard coded. So what this does is it's essentially like adding realism into the game. So there's this kind of new concept of, you know, players are getting even more value potentially from ads to that like they wouldn't previously before. Like it's not breaking up the user experience or anything.
Version,
Yeah. So I think the relationship of advertising in games, it's an interesting one. I think there's kind of trepidations, but there's also these opportunities where there's like you can literally kind of work with the game developer or work for a technology partner and adds to the experience. I'd love to see brands like lean in more to it. I think in the mobile world, like game developers have kind of used the technology well to do ads, things like payables, etc. But on my side of the table, I've only seen brands like really kind of scratch the surface. Yeah, I think intrinsic is going to be an interesting place for brands to tap into. I think you can get a CPG brand into like a football stadium well. So I think there's a bit more sort of reception to it. This
I think that's a pretty solid point in the sense that with what you're talking about, gamers can be very notoriously, if this is not like real, it's not organic.
Yeah.
And having an experience that's really not in your face, so to speak, like, here's an ad, just like simply. I mean, think about the amount of times you play a mobile game, an ad comes up, you have to wait for it to like finish loading, click the X, and you can play your game again. It's a horrible experience, no one likes it.
Yeah.
But right now, kind of circling back, right now, Royal Caribbean was kind of high on the line now. They came to us, tasked us, like, we have a new ship that's launching, and you want to also kind of cater towards a younger audience. So, how can we make cruising an exciting experience for younger audiences? What do younger audiences like about cruising? Some of the stuff that we get back is, okay, we like to explore the ship, and like the slides, and on the kind of all the cool things that cruises have. So how can we tie that into gaming? And what we did was with Fortnite, the game mode that we created is that you play hide and seek, essentially hide and seek.
I can see. Oh, clever.
But what they do is they get to play hide and seek. The hiders get to transform into any of the props that are on the ships. It could be a beach ball, it could be a tree, it could literally be like anything that exists on that ship. And gamers, they get to run around and try to find fun.
Yeah.
But what we're doing with that is we're hitting all those points that those younger audiences do. So creating something that's organic in the sense that it's what your audience is really looking for while not being so in your face.
I think you said something too, just like what audiences like to do. Like, right, the player is at the center of it in a lot of these gaming experiences, and advertising needs to take that into consideration, right? So.
That's a really that's a really smart activation because like there's this game made called Prop Hunt, and so that's just like an awesome example of like in advertising doing the research into like what does their game demographic like to do, and then like matching the brand with their habits. That's
I was just going to add an example of one of the things, one of the clients I work with is doing in the space. It's a big telecom company, provides internet and cable and mobile services. And we've gone in partnership with Twitch. And it's not necessarily in gaming, but it's obviously gamers are the ones who watch it. And we're promoting a gaming product specifically. That's a high-speed internet with, doesn't the score points behind it are that you don't get the lags. It's much faster, and you can have a very smooth gaming experience. So it was a product that we've been advertising just out there in general, targeting gamers but not in gaming. And then we decided we needed to shift to actually be in the gaming space. And Twitch was perfect because it's like it's a mass audience. A lot of attention is being paid to it, and it for the client, it didn't feel like they're jumping into an area that they're not comfortable with because it's almost like a peripheral platform to what you get.
It's easy.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, so I'm loving this discussion. So as we think about that, right, and we think about what players want and what advertisers want and their needs, and so there's so many games, there's so many platforms, there's so many ways to get involved, right? What should an advertiser or marketer keep in mind when thinking about building something that's going to be successful for them and their how would you encourage them to think about building something that will be truly successful for them and their brand, in the gaming space?
Yeah, I think one just like really practical example that I can kind of give of ways to make a mobile app campaign successful, for instance, is like making sure that end cards are included, or making sure that like you have a call to action to kind of make the best use of like the mobile app game space, because no other channels have this capability, but you can literally like have an upper funnel unit and then like drive a user towards a specific conversion. You can do that in mobile apps. Like, yeah, you can't do that in TV. There's been some kind of attempt to include like QR codes, like create a pretty clunky user experience. Mobile app games like do not have that actually at all. But one of the things that like app games kind of have differently from other channels, and I think is important to kind of be aware of, is games can sometimes have a pretty short life cycle. So especially in like the hyper casual space. So it's like quite rare that games will become these like household titles. You know, like Candy Crush is a great example of one. There's others like Words of Friends, but there's this really big chunk of like hyper casual games where the cohort of people will like play the game, like kind of complete the content, get bored, and then like go to another game. This kind of forced game developers to either like create sequels or just like create new titles. And so like as consumers, there are people, I'm not one of them, but they'll be happy to just like download tons of games. And so this can create an issue for marketers, because in other channels like TV, we're maybe used to whitelisting like specific channels or shows in games. That can be quite like hard to maintain. So my recommendation for advertisers is to look at games from like a genre lens. So instead of you could have your whitelisted titles, but also maybe like do some research into like what does my demographic like to play as far as like word games or puzzle games, etc. And this can just save you from having to go through a campaign like every week and updating it with like different things.
So it's like gaming is so volatile in the sense like you might release something in 2 or 3 weeks, probably like that and because of that, I think when you're initially planning to get involved in this, I really need to find out what your KPIs necessarily are going to be for this, because this is a very vague genre sometimes. If you're not building something that's interstitial and applicable, so understanding what your primary metrics that you want to define as, whether that's what people play my game, how long are they playing my game, are they coming back to play my game, compared to how often people play the specific game mode, are they playing this more often, and what is your definition of success for that? I think it has to come from when you're actually playing and getting involved in it versus later down the road when you're trying to like set it up. I don't think that's like the best time to do it, but starting from the beginning.
I'd say, first and foremost, you need to pay attention to the space, and the creative should be built for this audience in this space. And I think it's a lot to expect of a piece of video creative or display creative to do the same type of work that it might do in social, for instance, or in streaming video in the gaming space. I think the gaming space needs to be recognized for something in and of itself, and the message to the consumer has to somehow reflect the space in order to get kind of the most out of it. I think your point on KPIs is a really good one. I think the tricky part in gaming, from a brand metric standpoint, it's probably a lot easier. But when you're talking about other types of metrics, what's hard about it is the comparison points. And can you compare apples to apples in gaming as you would in streaming or in display or whatever it is? And getting to the point where you have a good understanding of what metrics does gaming really trigger? And is it brand consideration, is it conversion, and how can you kind of keep pushing that? I think measuring gaming is something we haven't really gotten into too much, but it's I think it's somewhat problematic right now. There's not a real, tell me I'm wrong, because you're the expert. But
We've got verification, and we do
there's a lot of
there's
things.
publisher level of
Absolutely
research. And
right, but
there are third party like Miller Brown is integrating with different can't are, difficulty there are.
And I
right?
think a lot of it's starting to develop, and I
Yes.
know there's been like MRC and IAB changes recently
Yeah.
where they've changed like what the definition of viewability is, and I think that's really important to help push forward, because I think up until this year it was like 10 seconds viewability counted as a view. And think about what's a display ad? Is it 2 seconds? That's a huge difference in gaming. And so, and 10 seconds can mean, you know, when someone's impatiently on their phone waiting for the ad to end, can just be someone swiping up and closing that ad.
Yeah, I think, I mean, definitely publishers like ourselves are working with the industry boards and industry to help communicate those things and to bring that to the marketplace for sure. I think we learn a lot through the campaigns too, right, and the partnerships that we bring and the exciting work that, you know, brand advertisers want to bring to gaming, right, because it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, the platforms are evolving, like, and, you know, we're fortunate, to your point, that we have a lot of beloved franchises that have been around for a long time, so we have a wonderful sandbox, right, to be able to test and learn. I think some of the challenge on your point on measurement is that a lot of advertisers are used to leveraging rear view research, right? Long volumetric market mix models, right? They take a long time to get to a place where they can be proving value, right? So I think that,
Right.
you know, when we think about where the opportunity space is, it's like, where are those adjacencies, or where is that perfect creative synergy where there can be something really compelling that will deliver on the KPIs? And I think to your point, like, starting there is always a great place to start. So
Yeah.
I think we're hearing a lot of wonderful advice from all of you. So I think for an advertiser who is interested and engaged but has never put $1 in gaming before, has never, you know, thought about it as a creative medium that's right for them, what advice, and I'd love to hear from all of you on this one, just like, what piece of advice would you say to an advertiser who's ready to get into gaming, you know, today?
I have a very, very simple one. Just play games. You mean, you can't expect to know how to make a commercial and watch TV. Same concept. Just play games. And then you'll understand where to bridge those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think play games is a great one. Just like a little bit of research and just kind of like fits well with my answer before of like looking at games from a genre perspective. Just do like a bit of research into like who your target audience is and like what games they play. There's like pretty significant trends in terms of like demographics in game genre. Examples being like word games that may be like a bit reminiscent of like word searches back in the day. You know, that tends to attract sort of like an older audience. You know, it's kind of like emulating that like back in like newspaper from, you know, a while ago. You get into like the racing games and the battle games, definitely skews towards more of that male demographic. So yeah, it can be pretty easy to, you know, have some confidence in like the context of your audiences just through literally like a couple Google searches. Yeah, that's great.
I'd say one, testing, just, you know, get in there and try it. Just see how it works, and you know, I think it'll start to pay off. Secondly, go in with an open mind. Don't let perceptions of what you think gaming is and what you think gamers are define your strategy. Do it based on research. Do it based on, you know, what the audience does, and think about how you can fit the brand into it in a natural way.
All right, so last question before Q&A. All right, so I'd love to hear a prediction from each of you. We're early in the year, right? First thought leadership event of the year for BIMA. Where do you see gaming heading in 2020, through the rest of 2023? And we'll start with you this year. Where's gaming going?
I'm going to say more opportunity in console gaming for advertising.
Two. Okay, two predictions.
I think interconnectivity is going to grow, so nowadays more and more games you see are adopting crossplay. So I think as an advertiser, you're not limited to console, you're not limited to just PC. Some games are on mobile too, as well as console, so you have a little bit more interconnectivity happening there. Another thing is free-to-play models. So a lot more games are adopting free-to-play models. Typically what that is, the game is free, you can just download it. However, additional things that are within the game itself, I think you can purchase and buy into that as a consumer, not the greatest thing, but as an advertiser, I think it's open season because you have an opportunity to bring your brand into that space. And that game game that publisher's hungry for more investment. So you have a lot more of that already happening. I think that's just going to be
Yeah, there's got to be a serious like theme there going. We're going to like say the same thing, but like in a different way. So, but I can add a bit of like context to like Adam's point maybe. So yeah, there's definitely going to be more opportunities in console, I think, and it's going to link more to that like intrinsic side of the house that I mentioned earlier with like those those ads that like integrated into the game. In reason being, like there's just seen so much success in this mobile app model with that like freemium, where there's like revenue coming from like in-game transactions and advertising. We've seen a huge adoption of in-game transactions happen in the console space. So like Fortnite and Call of Duty, just making like billions of dollars through those in-game transactions. I think it's only a matter of time before that kind of like advertising part of that model like really starts to get adopted and just gets that money sort of picked up. But yeah, like won't be the rewarded videos or the like interstitials. I think that's too much. But definitely the intrinsic, which that technology is being developed in the mobile space at the moment. I think we'll see that come to consoles.
Amazing. All right, well, it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you to these great panelists for providing like really thoughtful insights. I really enjoyed our conversation. And now, if anyone in the audience has any questions, we're here. Yeah.
All right, so I was a bad person. I was texting during all this with my 16-year-old stepson,
Okay.
who routinely pisses me off about 4 in the morning when he wakes me up gaming. But it was interesting. So I like went to him for learnings and things, and I said, what would help you, like from an advertising perspective, what's important to you, and do you use it? And he said, lots of streamers and YouTubers stream games are sponsored by companies. In game items such as clothes, tools, stuff, sometimes have brand names on them. For example, hoodie item we saw recently had Patagonia on it. So all good examples. My wife said, "Do you want to buy those?" Of course, he said, "Of course." So, and he said, "If they're from your favorite game, from your favorite streamer." So that's kind of like the back context. A lot of this has to do with what we're talking about, I think, from what I understand, is like advertising within the game. What other things do people do from outside the gaming, media to like get people involved in the game and attract people into it from an advertising perspective?
I mean, you talk about streamers and influencers, so that's one way to kind of build up what you're actively doing. Right now, for example, what we're doing for our Fortnite thing is that we are working with certain influencers and streamers to help boost our content. So they're playing our game with their subscribers sometimes too. So like not only are they just playing the game, but they're playing it with their subscribers at the same time. So they're both, I guess, they're boosting their interaction with their audience and they're boosting the engagement of our brand itself at the same time. I think that's one big way of doing it. I think another way, what we're talking about with the skins, is you can actually integrate your brand within the game itself in that way as well. Like you can make an avatar of like whatever you're working on, whether that's with Patagonia or like Nike or whatever. Like that's one way. I think also the holy grail as an advertiser getting into gaming is somehow integrating your game with the code itself and somehow making that mechanic of the game. Like you're making them play your brand. If that's something that you can do, I think that's a huge thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say, sorry, just like really quickly, there's been some games that have like really sort of been designed well with like their engines to kind of create like advertising opportunities. Like you do see it a lot with like the Fortnites of the world where there's a lot of like sponsored content. So yeah, some games and like some studios are a little bit better than others, and you'll see kind of like trends pop up where there's more opportunities in certain games. Like Roblox, Fortnite, etc. And then streamers are another very big platform for advertising in games.
Thanks for your question. You had a question.
I have a question for you. So integrating the mechanic of your brand into the game, what's an example of that? Like a car, like Maybach, shift, like what, give me an example of how that would work.
I mean, you mentioned a car, so like literally getting involved with Forza and having integrations with Mercedes.
Yeah.
Like you can say you're Mercedes, you want to release your new car, you can release a version of playing that, driving that new car in that game. That's
On that topic, how much are you seeing, or are you talking to brands who want to use game engine to create their own game? Right, so are a lot of brands starting to think about how can I use this game engine to create more meaningful experiences for the brands versus trying to integrate with, and that's probably a whole different conversation, but less of like a, hey, this is a media placement or this is an integration or it's intrinsic, but creating something from scratch.
Yeah, so I keep circling back to that whole thing, but we created that entire ship from scratch within the game itself. And now, I think even like last week, they released like something with a new engine. So like they have a new game engine where you're able to create like custom assets within the engine itself. So previously, as an advertiser, the big kind of limit that you used to have is, all right, they're using their own game assets to build something for us, but now you can bring in your own stuff and create within the game.
I would say also like the interactive component of what you're building can go, right? Make your own game and compete with the rest of the gaming marketplace, right? Because that's what you're doing when you build your own branded game, right? There are though ways in which you could be working with a partner, right, to integrate and create levels, different kinds of mini games, games within games, right? But there are also in-ad opportunities for interaction now today too. Like you can create, there are playable ads today, right? Or you can create mini games that live within ad units, right? That are much lower barrier to entry too. So there's an entire spectrum of the way in which you want to immerse your brand within a game, right? You might have a compelling creative idea, right? That is standalone. It will have the power, you'll have the support in the media to bring people to it. And then there are other times where you can be building a partnership or you can be building, leveraging the context that you already have to integrate to really integrate the brands together in a way that is pretty seamless even within an ad experience. So it's a pretty big spectrum, I would say, today.
I think that's probably, that's the advanced version of gaming advertising, right? That's for, I think, a brand who's established itself in the space, knows it works really well, and knows that something that they build on their own for entertainment could really stand on its own. I would hesitate to tell a client who's never done anything in the space to jump right in and do that, right? That's probably bad advice. So, but I think it's something you can really work towards, and if it has to work for the right brand. It has to be the right brand to do that. I don't think every brand would have the permission from their audience to build something where they're going to engage so deeply in it, they're going to spend their own personal time playing it. So it's got to be a brand that's got some, got some kind of a cult following or a real huge, a very passionate consumer base.
So a lot of the discussion tonight has been around advertising to the gamer, but I have a son who's on a varsity Overwatch team, and every Tuesday night my wife and I have Twitch up, and we're watching him play, watching all the tournaments. What about advertising to the spectators, and basically with esports? Do you see that changing, or that audience changing, or esports growing such that you're not advertising to the gamer who is focused on that game the entire time, but the people that are watching the game?
Yeah, I mean, esports is a very powerful platform for reaching a lot of what we consider to be very hard to reach consumers, right? So much like other sports media, right? A lot of opportunities exist to reach them the same way you would traditional sports media, right? It's just they're watching they're leveraging a stream, right, to watch that sports match, right? So I think that a lot of advertisers can think of it the way that they think of traditional streaming, right, video, right? There are some instances where stitched video, right? If you're getting right in there, right? There are product placement opportunities. There are brought to you buys. There are all those things. So a lot of the learning that has come from a rich advertising history of sports media are being applied to esports marketing today. I mean, I had the pleasure of going to the Overwatch finals in 2019, and it was amazing and bananas. And I went to a big college, Syracuse University. I went to a lot of sports games, and I'll tell you, the energy there was next level. It was literally like being in a March Madness tournament. Like I can't even explain it to you. So the passion there, and from a viewership perspective, is absolutely there, and leveraging all the expertise and the learnings around how to engage with fans, and this is really fandom, right? What we're talking about can very much be applied. It's just applying it to a different kind of audience group, and just a lot of the same principles apply.
I think one of my favourite facts from Playfronts last year was the viewership of the League of Legends, like esports. I can't remember what the tournament's called, but it's like higher than the NHL, like globally. So that's just kind of like, how big the audience size is. There are definitely certain games that have really invested into the esports like format, I guess you could say. And at Playfronts this year, Rocket League was one of the biggest kind of like the esports examples that they were giving, where it is very much like just like a real world, it's like normal kind of sports league. So yeah, it's like sponsored by like Mobile. The rewards are like $6 million for this whole year. And yeah, the way that they have, they call them like shoutcasters, the people like kind of do the broadcast voice. It's the kind of cross section of esports and real sports is really it's interesting.
I think like with Twitch streams to this day, you'll hear, I don't understand how people can watch it.
They have not watched GameStop quick
speed
racing, like speed runs and stuff. Yeah, like it's very cool. Like it can be really, really engaging.
I mean, he raised $2 million.
$2 million, yeah, $2 million for charity. Like this is big stuff.
I mean, if you think about why people watch sports, right? You watch other people overcome certain challenges, and that excites you. Why do you watch reality TV? Oh, you want to relax and unwind and just like watch someone do something and not be mentally kind of engaged. So it's like the connections are still there, but like you have to separate yourself from thinking, oh, it's just a video game. Like, why would I be watching? It's like people are watching it for the same exact reasons you're watching anything else.
Yeah, I would want to ask the question of media efficiency with that, and make sure that that the audience I'm advertising to in these spaces are maybe you're not a good example of it because you're watching your son, who you have a personal relationship with, obviously, do that. I want my ad to be speaking to the people who are passionate about watching that as an interest on their own, not because there's a familial relationship there.
Yeah, and I think about those young people who are doing this now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, are they going to be the audience watching that because of their interest, just like Monday Night Football? And that's just, I guess, a thought experiment. Is it going to get to that point with esports that is what they'll be watching instead of maybe Monday Night Football, or in addition to Monday Night Football?
I mean, time will tell, right? I mean, a lot of us in this room grew up with gaming, right? And it's a lifelong interest and enjoyment for a lot of people, right? When we talk about millennial gamers, when we talk about people today who are sharing their passions and their love of games that they played and grew up on with their children, right? So it's definitely multi-generational. I think that we saw that, 15 years ago with the democratization of music through streaming. I think we're seeing that happening with gaming today too. So time will tell. I'm hopeful, but so I'm curious how we are doing on time.
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes? Okay, we got time for questions.
I guess I have a question for the panel, but maybe specifically Meredith. How do gaming companies ensure that in-game ads are inclusive and diverse, given such a wide range of geographics?
Inclusive and diverse. So how are ads, in-game ads, inclusive and diverse? So, do you want me to, I can go first. I can talk about. So, when we think about advertising in-game, right? So, for example, we have a global advertising platform that is programmatic. So, lots of different advertisers can reach our target audiences, through our owned and operated channels. So, all different kinds of advertisers, all different kinds of brands globally. If you're thinking about that's like the ad product, right? Like actually video ads in games, contextually. If you're talking about how different brands can get into the game, I think that there are going to be advertisers who are more inclined right now to be playing in the gaming space because they have identified a target audience that is highly valuable to them, right? You see a lot of CPG advertisers specifically targeting men, advertising a ton of female gamers who are gaming. I think that smart advertisers today would be thinking about those audiences and thinking about how they can create that white space for themselves, knowing that this is a very big and broad audience. So when it comes to like the traditional kind of advertising route, like if any advertiser is available, can come into any game that offers a programmatic solution and reach a broad-reaching target audience. But I would say that there's a lot of opportunity for brands that maybe could add more diversity to the more integrated kinds of brands you see in games today.
Yeah, no, I would just add that I think it's a bigger question than gaming. It's a question of advertising in general. And, is the advertising community, creative community, I think specifically, paying enough attention to diversity in whatever form it is? Certainly, I think you've seen a lot of progress over the past few years. Does advertising today represent the population exactly from a demographic and a racial standpoint? Probably not, but it's probably a lot further along than it was. And then I think you just take that and apply it to gaming. I don't know that I'd segment it. I'd want to look at it as a whole, right, and answer the question sort of like from a society standpoint.
I think the content in video games has had a really interesting development over the past couple of years as far as like diversity and inclusion in it as well. So maybe it doesn't answer the question of like from an advertising perspective, but I think studios like Activision Blizzard and like other developers have done a fantastic job of making sure that specific individual groups are represented in the games as like the main characters, as people with like skin conditions, etc. So yeah, just put like a positive like spin on that. Like this whole topic, I think games industry as a whole is moving towards a very like positive and inclusive thing, which I'm sure a lot of people have noticed, and it's really it's really good to see.
Okay, we have time for one more, and I feel like you had your hand up over there. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you all for coming today. We've learned a lot. I was wondering, it sounds like the sky's the limit in ways that advertisers can get engaged. Do you have any advice on methods to avoid and things that are not resonating with gamers? Any red flags that we should be aware of in bringing advertising into that world?
So one thing I can say is we, as publishers, spend a lot of time and invest a lot of money in understanding what will work with players, right? So I think from a traditional advertising perspective, you can feel confident that when you are working with a publishing partner who tests and cares about the UI and has a strong trajectory and has been around for a long time, that they don't want to risk upsetting the players, right? So the ad products that we put are very, very specific and very, very choiceable in that. So I'd say that's the easiest way, I think, to avoid the pitfalls that can come with maybe moving too fast. Like, the question earlier about like building your own thing and making sure that when you're working with a partner that you're very clear with your KPIs, because I think the misalignment is what problems occur, I think, more so than anything. But I'm curious based on.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say think about the space, not as just, as I said before, an inventory source, but as a place where people are going and like spending their say hard-earned time to engage with and build whatever messaging you're doing in a way that is going to resonate and respect the gamer and not just push an ad that you might see somewhere else into there because it's a place you can throw an ad, but rather think about what is, how is the message going to resonate in the space and what am I trying to get the consumer to do? Just as you should with anything, but be thoughtful about kind of what the gamer's experience is and how you're projecting your brand.
I think that's like awesome advice. I say just make sure that you are seeing the end product of like what's being served. Like to Adam's point, like there will be solutions out there where you can just use creators from like other channels and like dump it into gaming. So I think like use caution on anything that's like too easy. So there are some solutions where you can use creators from other channels and it will work well, but just to have peace of mind, make sure you do see the end product so that there is no kind of like cognitive dissonance from the players. It's there's tons of opportunities out there, but you just want to make sure that you're doing it right.
And I'd also say listen to feedback too, once you've launched, right? Gamers are kind of by nature engaged in what they're doing, and they will say something if they don't like it. And so listen to that and take it into account.
Gaming is a very creative, natural space, and because of that, it's very easy to switch things up. So getting negative feedback, getting some kind of feedback is really go back to it, reevaluate, go back to it. Start off small. Just
Great.
Thanks everyone for coming in today. Thanks to our panelists and to Meredith and to Activision Blizzard Media. Hope everyone enjoyed it. I know I personally learned a lot, so thank you so much to the panelists.